What if I told you that an ancient mystical philosophy and one of the most radical thinkers of modern times were speaking the same language? Sounds unbelievable, right? But the more you explore Hermeticism and Nietzsche's philosophy, the more you realize they're asking and answering the same fundamental questions about life, power, and reality. So, here's the real question. What do an esoteric tradition from thousands of years ago and a 19th century philosopher famous for declaring God is dead have in common? More than you might think. Let's start with Hermeticism, an ancient philosophical system linked to Hermes Trismegistus, a mysterious figure often associated with the Egyptian god Thoth and the Greek god Hermes. Its teachings were preserved in texts like the Corpus Hermeticum and later popularized in the Kybalion, 1908, which outlined the 7 Hermetic principles, universal laws said to govern reality itself. These principles claim that all things are connected, everything vibrates, and the mind is the ultimate force shaping existence. Then there's Friedrich Nietzsche, a philosopher who turned conventional thinking on its head. He rejected organized religion, absolute morality, and passive living, instead promoting self-overcoming, personal power, and a radical redefinition of human purpose. He famously spoke of the Übermensch, the self-mastered individual who creates their own values and shapes reality through will to power. At first glance, Hermeticism and Nietzsche's philosophy seem like opposites, one mystical, the other existential, and even anti-religious. But if you look closer, you'll see they both explore the nature of reality, the role of the individual, and the hidden forces that shape existence. So here's what we'll uncover in this video. How do the 7 Hermetic principles align with Nietzsche's core ideas? Do they reveal a hidden truth about human potential? And most importantly, what can we learn from both to take control of our lives today? Stick around, because this journey will challenge everything you think you know about reality. Let's begin. The principle of mentalism and Nietzsche's will to power. Now, imagine waking up one day and realizing that everything you see, hear, and experience is not just happening to you, but because of you. Not in some mystical, exaggerated way, but literally. That reality, in some sense, is a construct of the mind. This is where the first Hermetic principle, the principle of mentalism, comes in. It states, the all is mind, the universe is mental. According to Hermeticism, the world is not something separate from us. It's a mental construct shaped by our consciousness. Everything, from the smallest thought to the largest cosmic event, is connected through the medium of mind. Now, let's turn to Nietzsche's concept of will to power. He argues that the fundamental force driving all life is not survival, happiness, or even knowledge. It is the will to power, the innate desire to shape and impose reality according to one's will. Sounds familiar? Both perspectives suggest that reality is not something static. The world does not simply exist. It is interpreted, molded, and transformed through the mind. Nietzsche's Übermensch, the higher individual who surpasses all limitations, is someone who understands this truth. The weak allow external conditions to dictate their existence. The strong, on the other hand, create their own reality by exerting their will to power. The Hermetic principle of mentalism and Nietzsche's philosophy both imply that the mind is not passive. It is a force that dictates the nature of existence. This isn't just abstract theory. This insight has the power to completely transform how we live. If your thoughts, perceptions, and interpretations shape your reality, then what happens when you start consciously directing them? What if, instead of being controlled by circumstance, you learned how to shape the very nature of your existence? This is what both Hermeticism and Nietzsche challenge us to do. The principle of correspondence and Nietzsche's eternal recurrence. Have you ever noticed how patterns repeat themselves in nature, in human behavior, and even in history? This isn't a coincidence. The Hermetic principle of correspondence states, as above, so below, as within, so without. This means that what happens on a small scale reflects what happens on a larger scale, whether it's the structure of an atom mirroring the solar system or personal struggles reflecting the broader patterns of society. Now, let's look at Nietzsche's idea of eternal recurrence. Imagine if your life were to repeat infinitely, exactly as it is, forever. Every action, every choice, would you live differently if you knew you had to experience it all again for eternity? Nietzsche uses this as a thought experiment, not necessarily to suggest that time literally loops, but to challenge us. If we were to relive our lives endlessly, would we make different choices? Would we take responsibility for shaping our fate rather than allowing external forces to dictate it? This ties directly to the Hermetic idea of correspondence. Just as the patterns within us reflect the patterns outside of us, our internal world, our thoughts, emotions, and choices shape the reality we experience. Both Nietzsche and Hermeticism push the idea that reality is not random. Everything we do repeats in cycles, whether through the habits we form, the people we attract, or the events that keep unfolding. Recognizing these patterns and mastering them allows us to break free from unconscious repetition and create a higher, self-determined existence. So, ask yourself, if your life repeated endlessly, are you living in a way you would be willing to relive forever? The principle of vibration and Nietzsche's perspective on change. Nothing is still. Even objects that appear motionless, like a rock, are vibrating at a molecular level. This is the principle of vibration in Hermeticism, which states, nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. In simple terms, everything is in motion, from atoms to galaxies, from our thoughts to our emotions. Nothing is fixed or permanent. Now, let's consider Nietzsche's philosophy of transformation. He famously wrote, "One must have chaos within oneself to give birth to a dancing star." Nietzsche rejected the idea of a fixed self. He believed that life is an ongoing process of becoming, not a static state of being. He saw personal growth as a continuous act of destruction and creation, tearing down the old to make way for something stronger. Both the Hermetic principle of vibration and Nietzsche's philosophy emphasize constant movement, whether in thought, identity, or reality. When people resist change, they suffer. The fear of movement, whether emotional, mental, or physical, traps them in a state of stagnation. Nietzsche's Übermensch is someone who embraces the vibration of life, constantly reshaping themselves rather than clinging to illusions of stability. So here's the takeaway. If everything is moving, everything is changing, then why not take control of that movement? Instead of being passively pushed by external forces, we can become active forces in our own transformation. The principle of polarity and Nietzsche's Dionysian versus Apollonian duality. Have you ever wondered why opposites seem to be deeply connected? Love and hate, creation and destruction, order and chaos, each one defines and strengthens the other. The Hermetic principle of polarity states, everything has its pair of opposites. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. This means that opposites are not truly separate. They exist on a spectrum. Light and dark, hot and cold, good and evil. These are not absolute, but different expressions of the same underlying force. Now, let's look at Nietzsche's concept of Dionysian versus Apollonian forces. In The Birth of Tragedy, Nietzsche describes two opposing energies. 1. Apollonian, representing order, structure, and logic. 2. Dionysian, representing chaos, instinct, and raw emotion. Nietzsche argued that the greatest individuals do not reject one side, they balance both. The Übermensch integrates both the Apollonian, rationality, and the Dionysian, chaotic energy, creating something entirely new. Both Nietzsche and the Hermetic principle of polarity suggest that power comes not from choosing one side, but from mastering both. Think about it. Can you truly appreciate joy without suffering? Can you understand order without chaos? Can you master logic without emotion? When you stop seeing opposites as enemies and instead recognize them as different expressions of the same force, you gain control over them, rather than being controlled by them. The principle of rhythm and Nietzsche's Amor Fati. Everything moves in cycles. Tides rise and fall, seasons change, civilizations rise and collapse. This is the Hermetic principle of rhythm, which states, everything flows, out and in. Everything has its tides. Nietzsche had his own way of expressing this truth. Amor Fati, love your fate, for it is your life. He saw life as a constant ebb and flow. Instead of resisting the inevitable ups and downs, he believed in embracing it fully. The problem? Most people fight against the natural rhythms of life. They resist pain, avoid hardship, and only seek comfort. But what happens when you fight the tide? You get dragged under. Nietzsche's Amor Fati, his philosophy of loving one's fate, is a direct reflection of rhythm. Instead of resisting, he teaches us to embrace every part of the cycle. So, what if you stopped fighting against life's natural rhythms? What if, instead of avoiding pain, you used it as fuel for transformation? The moment you start flowing with life rather than against it, you begin to master it. The principle of cause and effect and Nietzsche's critique of morality. Everything happens for a reason. Nothing in this universe occurs by chance. This is the Hermetic principle of cause and effect, which states, every cause has its effect, every effect has its cause. In other words, events don't just randomly happen. There's always an underlying cause. Every action you take sets off a ripple effect that shapes your reality. Now, let's look at Nietzsche's critique of morality. He argued that morality isn't some divine truth. It's a construct created by those in power to control others. In Beyond Good and Evil, he says, there are no moral phenomena at all, but only a moral interpretation of phenomena. Nietzsche believed that traditional morality, especially the kind rooted in religion and social norms, was not based on some higher truth, but was a consequence of historical and societal forces. It was a cause and effect system designed to benefit certain groups while keeping others weak. The connection between Hermeticism and Nietzsche here is profound. Hermeticism teaches that understanding the causes behind events allows us to change our future. Nietzsche teaches that morality itself is an effect of deeper historical and psychological causes, and we are free to reject it. Most people accept morality as an unchangeable truth, just as they believe their circumstances are fixed. But once you see morality as an effect rather than a cause, you gain the power to reshape it, to create your own values rather than inherit them. So ask yourself, are your beliefs truly your own, or are they simply the effects of a cause you've never questioned? The principle of gender and Nietzsche's Übermensch. This principle is one of the most misunderstood. The Hermetic principle of gender states, gender manifests in everything. Masculine and feminine principles exist in all beings. But this isn't about biological sex. It's about two fundamental forces, the active and the receptive, the creative and the structural, the expansive and the contained. Every person, every action, and even nature itself operates with this duality. Now let's consider Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch, the superior individual who rises above societal norms and limitations. The Übermensch isn't bound by conventional morality or identity. Instead, they integrate all aspects of being, both the rational and the intuitive, the disciplined and the chaotic. This aligns perfectly with the Hermetic idea of gender. The masculine force represents assertion, power, structure. The feminine force represents intuition, creativity, adaptability. Nietzsche's Übermensch isn't about being purely dominant or purely submissive. It's about achieving a balance of forces, mastering both elements within oneself. So, if you want to embody the Übermensch, the goal isn't to reject one side of yourself. It's to harmonize both, to embrace strength and intuition, discipline and creativity. That's where true power lies. Nietzsche and the occult connection. This might surprise you, but Nietzsche's ideas share deep connections with esoteric traditions, including the occult. While he openly rejected organized religion, his writings hint at something far deeper, a hidden fascination with mystical transformation. Let's look at Carl Jung, who studied both Nietzsche and alchemy. Jung believed that Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra was filled with alchemical and mystical symbolism, even if Nietzsche himself never explicitly stated it. Then there's Peter Kingsley, who studied ancient Greek mysticism. He suggested that Nietzsche's ideas echoed ancient initiation practices, where individuals underwent profound transformations, dying to their old selves and emerging as something greater. The biggest clue? Nietzsche's own concept of self-overcoming, the idea that one must destroy their old self to evolve. This mirrors the ancient mystical practice of transformation found in Hermeticism, alchemy, and esoteric traditions. So, was Nietzsche an unconscious mystic? Did he reject traditional religion only to unknowingly embrace ancient occult wisdom? It's a question worth considering. Why Nietzsche's philosophy feels hermetic? At this point, it's hard to ignore the parallels between Hermeticism and Nietzsche. Let's break it down. 1. Mentalism versus will to power. Both say reality is shaped by mind and force. 2. Correspondence versus eternal recurrence. Both suggest patterns repeat across different scales. 3. Vibration versus change. Both argue that everything is in motion. 4. Polarity versus Dionysian Apollonian. Both emphasize mastering duality. 5. Rhythm versus Amor Fati. Both embrace the natural flow of existence. 6. Cause and effect versus critique of morality. Both suggest everything has an origin. 7. Gender versus Übermensch. Both stress integration of opposing forces. What's fascinating is that Nietzsche likely never read Hermetic texts, yet his philosophy aligns so closely with them. This brings up an even deeper idea. Are these principles simply ancient knowledge, or do they reflect something fundamentally true about reality itself? Could Nietzsche and the Hermeticists have arrived at the same conclusions through different paths? And if so, what does that say about our own potential, the hidden power of these ideas today? At this point, you might be wondering, this is all fascinating, but how does it help me? Here's the answer. These ideas aren't just theories, they're tools for life. If Nietzsche and Hermeticism are right, then reality isn't something that happens to you, it's something you shape. Your thoughts, your choices, and your actions dictate your world. Here's how to use these principles today. 1. Embrace will to power. Stop waiting for permission. Act, create, take control. 2. Recognize correspondence. Look for patterns in your life. What repeats? What needs to change? 3. Accept change. Nothing is static. If you fear movement, you fear life. 4. Integrate opposites. Don't reject parts of yourself. Balance logic and emotion, strength and softness. 5. Flow with life. Resistance causes suffering. Amor Fati, love your fate. 6. Question morality. Are your beliefs really your own? Or are they just effects of someone else's cause? 7. Create yourself. The Übermensch isn't born, they are made. The choice is simple. Do you let the world define you, or do you define the world? We've covered a lot, from the nature of reality to the secrets of power, from ancient philosophy to modern existentialism. But here's the real takeaway. These ideas only matter if you apply them. Nietzsche wasn't just writing for scholars, he was challenging us. Hermeticism wasn't meant to stay in books, it was meant to be lived. So ask yourself, which of these principles speaks to you the most? How can you start shaping your reality today? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. And if you found this valuable, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because we have much more to explore. This is just the beginning.